put us to down.
Welcome back, folks. The Ray Lucia Show. Glad you're all here. 844-RAY-SHOW, the number. 844-729-7469. Talking about this whole concept of rebalancing your portfolio. And also discussing this with my pal, Gene Pastula, a certified financial planner. You made a comment, Gene. By the way, welcome.
Thank you.
You made a comment, you know, back in the day when you and I were all doing this full-time, managing money and et cetera, it was like automatic. It was, you had to, you know, the more you rebalance, the smarter you were as an advisor.
Yeah, you couldn't lose. You know, it just was a natural thing. Of course it's going to go up.
And what's happened over time is there's been a lot more research that's come in on this whole subject of rebalancing. And I was just quoting from William Baldwin from Forbes, who basically has gone back in time with some of the other propeller heads and calculated that rebalancing doesn't really add that much to the overall rate of return. Of course, there are times when it works fairly well if you only have two asset classes. But what have we heard for years? Small cap, large cap, growth, value, domestic, international, emerging markets, junk bonds. You start adding it all up and you got 8, 10, 12 different asset classes.
And then you have product diversification.
And product diversification on top of that.
Yeah.
So on Wall Street wrote, crash test, how safe is that retirement portfolio? And they really go into this whole concept of stocks, bonds, and a diversified portfolio. And the way they calculated the stock and bond portfolio is they looked at it three ways. One way was basically an all bond allocation, or a 60-40 mix of stocks and bonds. The other way was a 35-year withdrawal strategy. Let me just make sure I get this right. So let's see. Okay, so the first portfolio here was 100% bonds, as I said. The second one, oh yeah, was an age in bonds model. You've heard that one before. Yeah. You know, like in your case, since you're 70 years old, you would have 70% of your money in bonds and 30% in stocks. And every year, just like a target date fund in a 401k plan, you would add to your bonds and subtract from the stocks.
Yeah, because everybody knows that obviously the age that you start something has a tremendous impact on what the formula should be.
Yeah, absolutely right. Yeah, that's very scientific.
Yeah, exactly.
Your age minus 100.
Whoever came up with that is a genius.
It's being used quite a bit. And I've heard some pretty high up journalists talk about that strategy.
Maybe we could put that under the category of a rule of thumb.
Yes, rule of thumb.
Yeah.
And the third portfolio is an equally weighted, annually rebalanced mix of bonds, large cap stocks, U.S. small cap, and cash, et cetera, et cetera. Anyway, so this just speaks to the diversification aspects. Now, I hate these target date funds. I hate them, because what they do is counterintuitive to what the academic research has proven. The default mechanism for a 401k plan today is you put your money in. If you don't know what you're doing, they say, well, you're young. We're going to put you heavy in the stock market, and then we're going to reduce your stock allocation every year when you retire. And it will continue to reduce until you're dead. I also saw something that Financial Engines does, a really, really smart group, head up by a Nobel laureate, that did something similar to that. Don't quote me on that because I haven't really studied it, but I was reading it the other day and I said, this doesn't sound right to me, because when you look at the research done by David Blanchett from Morningstar, Michael Kitces from Pinnacle, Wade Pfau from the American College, and other really smart people, they say you really need to start your retirement with a higher allocation to bonds than stocks, but then you should add to the stock allocation each and every year. I don't want to get into that because that's a whole different bag of worms.
Well, you have a chart there that shows it, that if you showed that to them.
Yeah, I can't really show you the chart, but basically what this chart that I'm looking at talks about is the survival rates for various portfolios, or what age you actually run out of money. And with a 3% initial withdrawal rate, Surprisingly, an all bond portfolio ran out of money if you started it in 1930, or 31, I should say. Of course, it ran out at 99. All of these are in their 90s. But it ran out 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, about 20 times. You would think that something's safe and you're only taking 3% out, you'd never run out of money. But there were periods, in particular during the 30s, where from about 1931 to 1948, where even a 3% initial withdrawal rate, you would run out of money. If you became a centenarian, you'd be eating dog food. You get to the 4% withdrawal rate, and then it's from 1926 all the way out to 1956. Anybody that retired during that time period. In other words, the later on, you know, when you had the 300% or whatever was gain during the 1990s, that was a phenomenal time period for stocks, right?
Greatest bull market in the history of mankind, a friend of mine calls it.
Interestingly, the 4-asset rebalance portfolio never runs out of money at 3%. It only runs out of money once if you started in 1928, and you would have run out of money at 93 with a 4% withdrawal. And that, which is quite impressive, because the end result, which I don't want to tell you about because it's millions of dollars, and I don't want to give the wrong impression here. A 5% withdrawal rate, which is taboo, as you know, Gene,
sure,
in the investment world, never take 5%. But a 5% withdrawal with that rebalanced portfolio, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 times in history you would have run out of money. Just 6. And 5 of those 6 were 1926, 27, 28, 29, and 30.
Fortunately, back then, people didn't live that long,
Yeah.
so most of them never knew that they were going to run out of money.
Which brings me to our next segment, which is you. You are obviously in the business of helping people create multiple purposes for the use of their money. And you invented a product whereby they could take some of this portfolio. Because the one thing this doesn't measure is all the people that ran out of money a lot earlier because they didn't die. They ended up going in a nursing home and had to deplete their portfolio, not at 3%,
Then it
4%.
went down in a year.
Then it went down in a year or two.
That's right, yeah.
So when we come back from the break, you're going to talk about the linked benefits. You've got 20 seconds to tease what a linked benefit is.
I'm not a teaser, but it's probably one of the most fantastic protections against bad things happening to you in retirement, financially.
Okay, well,
No, that's not a good tease.
that was average. That was average. When we come back, we're going to talk about linking you up with a linked benefits plan, a very safe way for you to take care of emergency savings and healthcare costs during, before, or post retirement. We'll come back. The Ray Lucia Show continues. That was sort of a tease.
Yeah, you took like forever.
Welcome back, folks. The Ray Lucia Show. I did look up one of the studies, Mr. Gene Pastula, a study entitled Reducing Retirement Risk with a Rising Equity Glide Path by Wade Pfau and Michael Kitces. And just allow me, if I may, to digress for just a moment. The executive summary says this: this study explores the issue of what is an appropriate default equity glide path for client portfolios during the retirement phase of the life cycle. Translated, what's your asset allocation during retirement? Results show, surprisingly, that rising equity glide paths in retirement, where the portfolio starts out conservative and becomes more aggressive through retirement time horizon, have the potential to actually reduce both the probability of failure and the magnitude of failure for client portfolios. And they go on to talk about how a glide path starting at 30% equity and increasing it by 1 or 2% each year gave you the highest probability of success and the lowest probability of failure. Very interesting stuff, confirming what I've been talking about for the last 30 minutes or so. Gene Pastula in the house. That's something a lot of people don't know, Gene.
You know, it's something that is involved in the whole concept of what I mentioned earlier, was that portfolio diversification and the use of optional products instead of just stocks and bonds. As you've mentioned, and we've talked about on this program before, annuities, for example, are an incredible bond alternative. I mean, they're in the same category, yet the income that can be drawn from them by a retiree is significantly higher. I mean, almost twice as much, and depending on how old that individual is, maybe 3 times as much, because an older person can see, you know, income flows of 8–9% per year and guaranteed for their life. When you put that at the base of a portfolio, let's say the 30%, or excuse me, well, you wouldn't even need 60% stock, bond allocation in the example you just gave. I mean, half of that, 35 or 40% of the assets in the portfolio in an annuity is the equivalent of almost twice as much in bonds.
Well, it's interesting you bring that up, because there was a study done just like that by FRC Research, and they concluded that you could basically replace bonds in the portfolio and dial the rest of the portfolio up. And what was really interesting about that study, what caught my attention, was the fact that, because most people think that the heirs get hosed, but they don't if you actually can kick up a notch the balance of the portfolio, because you have a higher income stream coming from the annuity contract than you would from the bond. So to your point.
Yeah, and it all depends on the individual situation and whether they care about the heirs and all the rest. I have this vision of the old couple sitting on a beach somewhere with under an umbrella, and this good-looking lady comes out with a cocktail thing, and she hands these people, you know, their cocktails with the little umbrella sticking out of them, and then he toasts it. He says, or he gives her $20 and or what, 30 or 40 now, and says, "Dear, here's to us. That $40 that I just gave that young lady, that's the last penny we have. We spent our entire inheritance." And you see that on bumper stickers all the time, you know, as they go down the road and I'm thinking, you can't do that.
Right.
I mean, that's impossible, no matter how much you hate your heirs or don't care or anything else. You have to have a portfolio set up so that it will last as long as you do to provide you the lifestyle. And when you talk about bonds and stock allocations, which gets really complicated, and certainly nothing wrong with it, and especially if you have a lot of money, it's very, very important to be more precise. But the typical person who's worth maybe $500,000, million and a half in retirement, that's the level of sophistication is not, in my opinion, not near as important as basically coming down to saying, okay, what have you got that can pay me an income, and I don't have to worry about it, about living it, the value going down, or anything else.
What's really interesting about what Mr. Pastula just said. We tend to overthink a lot of stuff, all right? Now, I know you and I have simple minds, but I was talking about this whole rebalancing thing, where under these ideal situations of rebalancing, it added or subtracted 15 basis points from your total rate of return. And you know how many debates and how much time, I've spent more time on this program talking about rebalancing, that I'd rather pay the 15 basis points myself and get the time back. Which brings me to my next point, which is a lot of people are way underinsured for the most important things in life. And for retirees, that has to be healthcare. I'm writing about this subject right now. In fact, you owe me a whole chapter.
That's right.
You haven't gotten it to me yet, have you?
No, I haven't.
It's what I do.
You have to hold my feet to the fire.
I hit smart people up, get them to do my work, and I put my name on it.
I got you. Yeah.
But I'll give you a byline.
All right.
Linked benefits. You invented this. What'd you do? Channel your inner actuary?
No, I was having dinner with the president of an insurance company about 25 years ago, and he was telling me about this idea he had that he didn't see any reason why we couldn't pay a death benefit early on a life insurance policy if the person needed it for the largest thing that he saw coming down the pike, the financial thing, was long-term care. And I just thought it was a brilliant idea, because I was getting tired of telling people about life insurance and them telling me, yeah, that's a pretty good thing, but you know, you got to die and then somebody else gets the money. And, and you know, and here it was, you know, you don't have to die and you can have the money. I'm not sure that's the way you want to do it, to pay for your nursing home care. But the point is that when you're looking at the one financial concern that we have at the older ages of life, at the end of life, it's paying $50, $75, $80, $90, $100,000 a year to have somebody come in and take care of you because you need assistance. And a life insurance creates this huge amount of money. So they gave me the ability to act, it's called accelerating the death benefit. And then I went in and figured out, okay, how do you put this together in a strategy that makes sense to people, particularly people who invest? Because most of the individuals that I've taught and worked with over the last 40 years have been people who are in the business of managing money and assets and what have you, and not selling insurance policies. So we created a linked benefit product that says you can take a portion of your portfolio, call it $100,000 just for the math, that's sitting in a safe place in your portfolio. If you have that kind of money, it's not supporting your lifestyle, and simply reallocate it to a life insurance cash value, which essentially is, when it goes on the balance sheet, it looks pretty much the same as a bank account or CD or money market, what have you. It's money that's safe, liquid, typically has a little higher interest rate in it, and there's no tax. But what that interest rate does is supports a leveraged death benefit. So $100,000, for purposes of simplicity, in the portfolio sitting there in money that you can get at if you want, but if it's there when you die, your heirs would get, say, $200,000, all tax-free. That's a life insurance policy, no big deal, been doing that for years and years. And what we said was, well, why don't we just tweak it and say, instead of having to die to get the $200,000, what about if you just needed it for long-term care, and you could tap that $200,000, and whatever portion of that $200,000 you didn't use for your care would go to your heirs. And we didn't stop there. We said, okay, but what if the individual lasts longer than the 2 years and uses up all that money for nursing care? Now what? Well, we put additional little riders on it that said, if that happens, then the insurance company will step in and continue to pay you monthly benefits for up to 2 or 4 more years longer. So our $200,000 in that case turned into $600,000 if long-term care, if you needed that much. Huge value to the client with no risk.
Absolutely right. And what I love about this strategy, when he says no risk, is the money's liquid. This is not one of these big, heavily loaded,
no.
You know, you get creamed by 50% or whatever of the cash value. You're just literally taking money from one pocket and putting it into the other pocket. And you have access to it and a principal guarantee after a couple of years. And take all your money back if you don't like them. I got to take a break. If you want to learn about that, go to safemoneymonitor.com. Safemoneymonitor.com. Gene will send you the copy of the chapter that he's writing for me in my book. SafeMoneyMonitor.com. Thank you, Gene.